Hi and welcome to State of Mind. I'm Dr Shyam Bhat, psychiatrist and physician, and this is the podcast about everything to do with the mind, mental health, psychology, neurobiology, and a lot more, with a particular emphasis on the Indian mind. What is it like for us to live in a fast-changing society with so many rapid changes in our socioeconomic status, in our relationships, in our way of life? What is it doing to our minds? Well, clearly, as I shared in my last podcast, we're not doing that great right now. We are suffering. India is facing an unprecedented epidemic of stress, anxiety, and depression, and this is hurting everybody, including our youngest. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about depression in today's podcast, how you can recognize it, what you can do about it, and what are some of the challenges in treatment. But first, I want to share a couple of stories. Well, not stories, but observations I had over this last week. First of all, happy Sankranti to all my listeners from the south of India. It used to be a huge festival, my grandmother tells me, but now not much, right? Not too much happening. And when you think about it, the biggest festivals are the ones that companies can commercialize, right? I mean, think about Christmas and Diwali, and it's become all about consuming things, about materialism. So anyway, I digress. Those two observations I was talking about. So it was Sankranti, and I was on the terrace of my house, and as you often do, I was just looking out, and I happened to see my neighbor's house. And they had just finished a little puja for the festival, and as is customary, the children were touching their parents' feet to seek their blessings. So there were two kids, and the younger kid, he must have been about 7 or 8 years old, innocent boy. He was asked to touch his parents' feet, and he did it with a lot of enthusiasm, I must say. But then his older brother, who's I think maybe in his teenage guy, 16, 17 years old, I could see that he was embarrassed about this, about touching his parents' feet. He didn't seem comfortable. He was very reluctant, and he sort of, almost very perfunctorily touched their feet and just left. And I've spoken to a lot of young people who tell me that they don't see the value in touching their elders' feet. Why should I touch my elders' feet when I don't respect them, is something I've heard. Or, age doesn't necessarily buy you respect. Just because you're old doesn't mean I have to respect you. So a lot of young people, I think it's not cool anymore, it's not trendy, and it doesn't fit in with their worldview. Now here's my concern. I'm not a conservative guy. I'm not talking about, being traditional for the sake of being traditional, but as a psychiatrist, I am interested in how social changes affect human behavior and moods. Now, if you go back to the US, you will see that an individualistic society, a society where the individual reigns supreme, they don't have this touching the feet business. And touching the feet is only a symptom, only a sign of something much deeper. If you are willing to touch the feet of your elders, then you are also submitting yourself. You're also surrendering your ego. You are saying that I as an individual need and seek the blessings of my elders and of other people who can support me and guide me. You're saying that I have the ability to have faith in something larger than me. And that is very essential for mental health. It's usual and it's healthy when you're younger to say, listen, I believe that I as an individual have the capacity to completely do whatever I want in my life, and therefore I don't need faith. Faith is for losers. I understand that. I get that completely, and as I said, that's healthy when you're younger. But live a little longer and you'll realize that no matter how strong you are, no matter how determined you are, life does not always go according to plan. Correction, life never goes according to your plans. In the larger scheme of things. There are things in this life, in this existence, that are beyond your control, beyond my control, and we have to accept that. In my line of work, I'm constantly reminded of that. Good people who are suffering, who are facing challenges that had nothing to do with their choice. A person who's successful and has worked hard and then loses it all because of no fault of their own. A person who gets a disease at the prime of his or her life. A person who loses somebody dear to them. A person who faces their own mortality. Invariably, every one of us realizes that loss is a part of life. That inevitably, the people you love will have to pass on. And that ultimately you have to pass on. So what control are you trying to exercise over your life? I'm not saying be apathetic. I'm not saying don't try. I am saying watch and notice where you're exercising control, and if it is of no use, then I'm asking you, do you have the courage to let go, to surrender? A person who doesn't accept that is fighting all the time. They're resisting rather than going with the flow. To illustrate this point further, let me just share the other incident I noticed over the weekend. So I was sitting at my desk and looking out, and I saw a moth. This moth, the insect, had entered the house clearly and was trying to find a way out. So it would keep flying up only to hit the ceiling and fall down again. It kept doing this. I watched as the moth fluttered, tried to escape, hit the ceiling, fell back. Now on the side there was a little opening, but the moth couldn't see it because it was trying to escape in the best way that it knew how, by flying. So the moth kept flying, kept hitting the ceiling, kept falling down. So it kept doing that. It must have been about close to 5, maybe 10 minutes that it was flying, hitting the ceiling, falling back. And then it gave up. The moth just fluttered to the ground, tired, exhausted. And then as it lay helpless, lying on the ground, it suddenly sensed the breeze, the light of the opening. The opening that had eluded the moth because it was trying and trying so hard, doing the same thing over and over again. A few moments later, it flew out through the opening into freedom. The perfect metaphor for the power of surrender. So listen, if you're facing any kind of challenge, any kind of difficulty, a difficulty that is continuous, chronic, and that you don't know how to change, then first realize the futility of what you're doing. Understand that like the moth, you've probably been flying and hitting the ceiling over and over again. Once you know that and you accept that, then you surrender. You say, I'm giving up control over that which I cannot control. I'm letting that go. Letting it go to a higher power. Whatever you call that higher power, you may say I'm surrendering to the universe, to nature, to my higher self, to love, whatever it might be. But what's really important is that you let go of unnecessary resistance. Give that up. And in giving it up and surrendering, you will find your strength and your freedom. In the words of my childhood hero, Bruce Lee, notice that the stiffest tree is most easily cracked, while the bamboo survives by bending in the wind. You're listening to State of Mind with me, Dr. Shyam Bhat. So recently in my practice, I was consulted by a lady who said that she thinks she might have depression. Now, by the way, when I share case details and anecdotes from my practice, I just want to be very clear that all the details have been changed and permission has been obtained where necessary. Now, I wish that this case was unusual, but it isn't. She came to me saying that for years she had been feeling low, sad, exhausted. She was sleeping a lot. She'd get up in the morning, felt as if there was a ton of bricks on her head. She didn't feel like cooking, she didn't feel like going out, couldn't interact with her family. And none of her family members understood what was going on. Her husband, she said, was fed up with the situation. They hardly spent any time together. This lady had hopes and dreams of, doing something with a career, but she just couldn't bring herself to do that. And now she was so isolated, so alone in such a dark place that for many months she had been contemplating suicide. As I said earlier, I wish this was a rarity. But just like her, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this country who are suffering from depression and who are suffering every day, who suffer for years without getting the help that they need. Of course, in this case, I made a diagnosis of depression. She started therapy. She also needed medicines. She did yoga, pranayama. She paid attention to her diet. Through therapy, she was able to understand herself. She was able to improve her self-esteem. The medicines further helped the depression, and a few months later, she was completely free of depression for the first time in years. And when her family saw that, they understood for the first time that depression is real. It's not imagined, it's not a luxury, it's not a choice, it's a medical condition that affects brain, mind, and body, and sometimes has fatal consequences. So I'm telling you this story because if you're out there suffering alone, if you don't know why you're feeling sad chronically, why you're tired, why you're sleeping more or less than usual, why you're so stressed out, or why you feel so bad about yourself, if any of this is happening to you, then don't hesitate. Seek professional help. Thanks for joining me on State of Mind. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Comment on this link or follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you back for the next State of Mind.